I would like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of November the 6th, 2023 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Bernay, Councillor and Chair of the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of emergency, please evacuate the council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given, and if assistance is required, please see our Deputy Clerk, Devan. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure your cell phones are either silent or turned off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Committee of the Whole meetings are posted and are on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on all our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. Roll call, all members of council are in attendance. We also have staff in attendance tonight, either in person or remotely. And additionally, we have Terry Miller from the Royal Canadian Legion, Chief Warrant Officer Linehan, as well as Warrant Officers Reynolds and Smith. From the West Niagara Army Cadets, we have Nick Karakis, Rob Kane, and Rob Morningstar from the Ministry of Transportation. And we have Staff Sergeant Chris Lemich from the Niagara Regional Police attending as well. Welcome all. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, do members have any amendments to the order of the agenda? Thank you. We have no statutory public meetings this evening, so we are now at the consent agenda. We are now considering the consent agenda, inclusive of the Museum Advisory Committee minutes of June 22nd, 2023, and the Age-Friendly and Active Community Advisory Committee minutes of September 7th, 2023. Would any member of committee like to remove this item from the consent agenda to discuss? Seeing none. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers that all items under the heading of consent agenda for Monday, November the 6th, 2023 be adopted as recommended. Museum Advisory Committee minutes of June 22nd, 2023, and Age-Friendly and Active Community Advisory Committee minutes of September the 7th, 2023. And I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. I'm now going to close the vote, and that motion carries. Thank you.
We are now at the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee portion of the agenda. Delegations. We have one registered delegation for the Community Services and Infrastructure agenda, and our delegation for this evening is Terry Miller, Poppy Chair, Veteran Service Officer, Royal Canadian Legion 6112, and Warrant Officer Linehan from 1626 West Niagara Army Cadets, along with Warrant Officers Smits and Reynolds. And this is all with regards to the importance of Remembrance Day. Please come forward.
For a moment, please. Thought that would make it easier. Apparently not as easy as I thought. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Terry Miller. I am a 20-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm also a member of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 612 in Beamsville, currently holding the positions of Poppy Chair and Veteran Service Officer. This being National Veterans Week, I would like to speak to you this evening on what Veterans Week signifies, the importance of Remembrance Day, and the role of the Royal Canadian Legion. Veterans Week is a time to honor, celebrate, remember all those who have served and are currently serving Canada in our times of war, military conflict, and peacekeeping missions. 2023 also marks the 75th anniversary of United Nations peacekeeping. Canada has a long history of helping defend and maintain peace around the world. More than 125,000 Canadian Armed Forces members have served in international peacekeeping missions in dozens of countries. We recognize them and remember their courage, service, and their sacrifice. On November 11th, Canadians take a moment of silence to remember the individuals who have served and continue to serve our country in times of war, crisis, and peace. More than 1.5 million Canadians have served this country. World War I, World War II, Korea, peacekeeping missions, Gulf War, NATO missions, and the Afghanistan War. And over 112,000 have died in the process. Their sacrifice, their lives and futures so that we may live in peace. The Royal Canadian Legion was established in 1925 by the amalgamation of various veterans groups. Today, we are still dedicated to supporting veterans and providing essential services within our communities. The Legion takes the responsibility of leading in the promotion of remembrance and our communities and our nation. The Legion promotes remembrance to our younger generations through working with schools, youth organizations to keep memories of our fallen veterans alive. Our mission is to serve veterans, including serving military, RCMP members, and their families to promote remembrance, to serve our communities and our country. As some of the veterans suffer from physical and/or mental disabilities, the Poppy Campaign Fund is used to assist them in times of need, whether it's for medical appliances and equipment, heating costs, assistance with prescription medications, clothing, grants for food, dental care, housing and accommodations, and care facilities for veterans, essential home repairs and emergency shelter, assistance to veterans to get medical appointments. We also advocate for veterans. In my role as Veteran Service Officer, I have participated in and have witnessed to how the funds through the Poppy Fund are used to assist our veterans within our region, finding housing for homeless veterans, engaging with veterans who suffer from PTSD to connect them with the proper program support, providing grocery cards or rental assistance to assist them in their time of need, and providing medical appliances for veterans. On November 11th, on the 11th hour, please take 2 minutes in silence to remember our fallen veterans. Thank you for having me here today, and I always appreciate the opportunity to share my experience with you as a Canadian veteran, Veteran Service Officer and Poppy Chairman, and our role the Canadian Legion's Poppy Campaign plays in supporting our veterans. And please remember, we have 2 services in the town of Lincoln this year. Wednesday at 10:40 in Lions Park, and also on Saturday, the 11th of November, at our cenotaph in Beamsville, which is located at Jacob Bean School. Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Cadet Warrant Officer Smith of 1626 Royal Canadian Army Cadet Corps. In World War I, more than 650,000 Canadians served in the war, and around 66,000 gave their lives. In World War II, over 1 million Canadian military personnel served, and about 45,000 of those lives were lost. Hundreds of Canadians in recent times have also given their lives in several war efforts. The brave actions and sacrifices made by past and current military personnel have granted Canada grand opportunities. Their dedication to serving our country must be venerated. Those men and women who joined the military to aid in both world wars knew it would be dangerous. As they trained, they were willing to endure the strenuous tasks that they were put through. Even when they were put in those trenches, or the battlefield, or had to care for many of the wounded, or aided the military in any other way, they knew they might not survive. However, they also knew that their actions would serve the country that they had lived in and loved. This is also why Canadian citizens join the military today. They know the risks, but they know their service has worth. What these people did to serve Canada was not in vain. Because of those fallen soldiers, Canada, alongside other countries, are able to live in peace and prosperity. We are able to live freely because of their sacrifice. Now, why should we remember all of this? Many soldiers who lost their lives have been recorded and commemorated, but many others have been lost to time. The best we can do is offer a remembrance of every unknown soldier. Having a time to remind ourselves of these people's actions, whether we know their names or not, gives their sacrifice purpose. They won't be forgotten in time because we will ensure that we remember and appreciate their service. For all those who lost their lives, their actions and unsung heroism will not be lost. We must not forget the choices they made and the decisions future soldiers will make for Canada's sake. They gave their lives for our peace and goodwill, so we must not forget to ensure their sacrifice is remembered. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Cadet Warrant Officer Reynolds of the 1626 Royal Army Cadet Corps. Today we're discussing what I believe to be one of the most important parts of Canadian culture. On November 11th, 1918, an armistice was reached between Germany and the Allies, ending World War I, and the following year, Remembrance Day was officially recognized. But let us take a second to truly think about what Remembrance Day is. If you were to ask me, I would tell you that November 11th is a day of reflection, an opportunity to truly process the gratitude and respect for the veterans not only in our country, but across the globe. It is a time where for a few minutes, the world stops spinning. Silence falls over the country, and for a moment, despite our differences, a connection is recognized. Canada is a diverse country with many different people, beliefs, and systems. And when it comes to Remembrance Day, we all stand together to recognize those who have served, those who are currently serving, and those we have lost. As they together have created and maintained this country we today have the honor of calling home. And so if you were to ask me what I believe Remembrance Day is, I would tell you that it's a day of reflection that connects people on a level unseen before in history. And this is why I believe it to be the most important part of Canadian culture.
Hello and good evening. I am Cadet Chief Warrant Officer Lanahan of 1626 Royal Canadian Army Cadet Corps. When I think of what it means to me to remember, a lot of things come to mind. It means to appreciate and acknowledge the bravery and selflessness of veterans, to remember and understand the impacts of war on individuals, families, and communities. Remembering to me also means to educate and teach future generations about the significance of remembrance and how we can show our gratefulness by wearing poppies, participating in remembrance events, and supporting organizations that aid our veterans. It also means to remember to show gratitude for the freedoms we enjoy today. And to me, that means to remember every day and always being thankful in every time of the year. It is so important to me to remember, to preserve their stories, and to ensure their sacrifices are never forgotten, to help us learn from the past and strive for a more peaceful and better future. Thank you, lest we forget.
Thank you very much for all four of you for delegating this evening. Terry, if I could just ask you to come back to the mic. I'm just going to open it up. Thank you all for being here, and Are there any questions of the delegates from any members of council?
Counselor, can you put your mic back? Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Magic. Thank you for the presentations, moving, very moving. And my question is for you, Mr. Miller, about, you were talking about where the POPI funds go and to support veterans. And I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about how that campaign has gone over the last few years? Has COVID affected it? Are you seeing an increase? Are you seeing a decrease? Do you have knowledge about that?
Yes, COVID was a big factor in affecting our remembrance, but it wasn't a huge factor in people donating and participating in the POPI campaign. However, releasing the funds back to veterans and their families in support of veterans, it took some time due to COVID. So as of, we had $71,000 in our POPI fund here for the town of Lincoln back in 2022, and in that year, we dispersed $48,000 back to veterans, $25,000 towards homeless veterans. We've assisted with residents with mechanical aids, or medical aids, I should say, chairlifts, donated a lifting device as well for Albright, which has, at that time, 8 veterans to assist there. We also work as a group within the Niagara region, right down from our Vice President of Provincial Command, Diane Condon, and we have a group of us that all deal and work with as a team in support of homeless veterans and veterans that may have not be doing so well because of their income levels. You have to understand certain people are now in their 70s, 80s, and their income at the retirement age back when they were, say, 55, 60, or when they became disabled, has now been frozen. So they don't have that increased income. So we've assisted with dental, we assist with food cards, but one of our main drives for us here in Lincoln, because most people are housed, so we like to see to get our veterans off the streets, out of shelters, and into homes and a roof over their head and warm food in their bellies, and give them back their own self-pride so they can sustain themselves moving forward. Last year, we put out another additional 20-some-odd thousand back into the community for our veterans as well. So our POPI campaign, as we have no large retail outlets like a Costco or a Walmart, in the town of Lincoln, we normally generate approximately $26,000 to $28,000 in our POPI campaign annually. So on that funds is then dispersed as required to our veterans who come see us in need.
So that's the average, 26 to 28,000?
Which is perfect.
And it's
It's wonderful
consistent.
to see from our community, yes.
That's great. What can any of us do to assist further, to get the word out, or is there anything that we can do?
One of the things that we've done, we have some regional community groups that help with like Outreach Niagara and so forth, is one of our issues we have is finding veterans that are in need, because a lot of veterans are very proud and they will not come forward and ask for assistance. So if someone is aware of veterans, or you may know of a veteran that's in need, whether regardless, it could be in a physical or in a mental state, we're there to help. And we can be reached at the Legion. We have our Legion phone number available. We can put out, or come in and see us, and or give me at poppy.rcl612@gmail.com, and we'll help wherever we can.
Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I'm not seeing any other questions from council, but I do think Mayor Easton would like an opportunity to have a photo op with the 4 of you. If we could do that, that would be awesome. Very much appreciated.
Chair, may I ask that we do the motion first and then move to the photo?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair.
So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Michalak that the committee receive and file as information the delegation from Terry Miller, Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 612, and Chief Warrant Officer Linehan, 1626 West Niagara Army Cadets, regarding the importance of Remembrance Day. And I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair, and I just added Warrant Officer Reynolds and Smith into that motion as well.
Thank you very much.
And that motion is now open. Thank you. And that motion closes, and that is carried. Thank you.
Who is going to take the picture?
I will take the picture, Chair, if council members want to go around the podium.
Awesome, thank you so much. Let's do it. We are now at 7.2, reports, and we will consider report PW-10-23 regarding the truck bypass camera monitoring pilot project. And our Director of Public Works will provide a presentation, and staff from the Ministry of Transportation and the Niagara Regional Police are in attendance to provide comments and assist with any questions. Dave, please go ahead.
Yeah, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Mayor Easton and councillors here this evening. I would like to say thank you for giving us the opportunity tonight to provide an update on our truck bypass camera monitoring pilot project. So this pilot project has a strong alignment to council's strategic priorities. When we look at promote a healthy and safe community, when you consider road safety initiatives such as truck safety blitzes and enforcement initiatives. So how we got here. Back in April 15th, 2019, council passed a resolution regarding truck safety in Lincoln. And one of those key action items was to undertake scale inspection, station avoidance enforcement blitzes. So what is scale inspection station avoidance? So the Vineland Inspection Station, or sometimes referred to as the scale, is located along the QEW between Vineland and Beansville and operates in the westbound direction of traffic. Trucks are obligated to turn in and undergo a vehicle inspection, if required, when the station's lights are on. However, there's a portion of truck drivers that avoid the inspection station by exiting the QEW in advance and bypassing around it using regional and town roads. And drivers avoid the inspection station for a number of reasons. You know, they may want to save time on their route, or they may have known issues with their licensing or even vehicle defects, which they don't want officers to discover. So I think this slide here really demonstrates the progress that's been made with a strong partnership that's been built between the town, MTO, and the Niagara Regional Police to complete frequent truck safety blitzes each year with a focus on scale avoidance in Lincoln. And if you look at this graphic here, when we first started this program, back in 2019, we did one a year, and this year we've done 5. And I just want to reinforce that, you know, these blitzes are significant. They take a lot of planning, they take a lot of resources and a lot of work. And I'd like to thank this team here this evening, from representatives from MTO and the Niagara Regional Police, for their leadership with these blitzes, and we really appreciate it as the town. So this slide here kind of gives an overview of the camera monitoring pilot project. And I apologize if the map's a little small, but just to kind of highlight where our cameras are. So we have 2 cameras currently installed, one at the Victoria Avenue QEW exit, and we have another camera installed on King Street, just west of Victoria Avenue, with those blue stars on that map there. And the objective there is to monitor trucks bypassing around the Vineland Truck Inspection Station, because that's kind of the known bypass route, is for trucks to take Victoria Avenue, they exit in advance of this station, go down Victoria Avenue to King Street, then turn right on King Street, go along King Street all the way to Beansville, and then get back on the highway either using Ontario Street or Bartlett Road, which is a big concern for the town. We don't want these trucks going through our urban areas. You know, we are trying to reduce the amount of truck traffic in our downtown areas, so if they're bypass trucks, we don't want them in these areas. So, you know, this is, you know, a huge objective for us with this program. And when you look at this map here, we also have a traffic monitor on Green Lane, just west of Victoria Avenue, because we also suspect trucks will try using Green Lane as a bypass route as well, so we're monitoring truck volumes on that road as well. And you'll notice on this map, we have a little green star on King Street. So what we'd like to do, we'd like to expand this pilot program to add an additional camera on King Street east of Victoria Avenue to capture potential bypass trucks that are getting off the QEW using Jordan Road, coming down Jordan Road to King Street, and then going along King Street and coming up through Jordan Hollow. I know we've received concerns from residents living in the Jordan area with some of the new development there in Jordan Village. So this is something we do want to, you know, have a priority on, and we've had some feedback from our MTO enforcement group that is a very good location to start targeting potential bypass trucks in that area. So a little bit about the camera monitoring pilot project. So the pilot program uses smart surveillance AI technology, and you know what that encompasses. Automatically, the MTO officers get a notification that the same truck has been detected on both those cameras, meaning that it could be a potential bypasser bypassing around the station. The cameras can also capture truck images showing the company's name, logo on the door, has a license plate reader capability, and the system also detects a running total of how many times a particular truck has bypassed, which is really important because it helps MTO focus on repeat offenders. And the town is also able to collect truck volume data to help identify and monitor trends. MTO enforcement plan with the cameras. So just to highlight a couple things. So based on the camera images of the commercial vehicle, it shows the company's logo, also the license plate reader information, and the officer can decide, you know, is that truck a potential bypasser, and should it be intercepted en route? And once the MTO officer stops that truck en route, you know, they engage in a conversation with the driver, try and learn a little bit more, you know, where are they going, what's their destination, and if suspected that the driver's avoiding the inspection station, the officer will escort that truck all the way back to the Vineland Truck Inspection Station for a further detailed inspection. whereby fines and charges could be laid depending on the situation. So this slide here, we wanted to share some of the truck volume data that we've been able to collect to date with our cameras. So this one here represents the King Street camera. So this would capture all trucks going by that camera. So it would capture trucks that come down Victoria Avenue, both north and south, and turn right and head towards, or left, coming down towards Beansville. It would also pick up trucks that are coming from the Jordan Hollow direction. So it kind of gives us a total number of trucks on King Street at that location. So when you look at this graphic, the blue shaded area on the graph represents your average daily truck volume on King Street when the scales aren't on. And as you can see, in February, the daily volumes are a bit lower, and then they increase when you go into the spring and summer, which can be expected because that's seasonal when you have more trucks on the road in the spring and in the summer with construction activity, agricultural activity. So that can be expected. It fell off a little bit in July, but so it's important to note that blue line kind of represents your daily traffic volume on King Street. What the orange buffer area represents is when the increase in truck traffic when the scales are on. So that would be identified as potential trucks bypassing the scale, and that shows you the increase in truck volume that's being seen on King Street as a result. And I would qualify too that we have an average here. We're saying about 26% on an average increase we're seeing in truck volumes when the scales are on. But that's probably a bit conservative because we can't say that all those trucks are actually bypassing. The MTO officers would be able, they would pursue those trucks and then they would make that decision if that person is deliberately bypassing. But it does give you a pretty good representation of what that potential bypass traffic is looking like so far. The other thing I'd like to note too is we've only been able to collect data for, the first 5 to 6 months. It's had quite a bit of varied results, so we do want to continue with the pilot program to collect more data to help us, really better understand truck traffic patterns and look at some trends. This particular graphic here we're showing the truck traffic on Green Lane. So this would be Green Lane just west of Victoria Avenue. And again, similar to the other graph, the blue shows your baseline's daily traffic when the scales aren't on. And as you can see, it goes up as we head into spring, into the summer, again, which can be expected. And then that orange is showing us the increase of truck traffic that we see on this road per day when the scales are on. And again, so it's representing that potential bypass truck traffic. And then for Green Lane here, we took an average, it's about 17% of an increase in truck traffic on Green Lane, which in this case represents about 4 trucks per day when the scales are on. So not a lot, but that's what we're seeing so far. So some next steps with the pilot program. Like I said, we want to continue to collect more data to gain a better understanding of truck traffic patterns and trends throughout the year as it relates to the Vineland Truck Inspection Station situation for avoidance. Also, based on feedback from the MTO enforcement team, we'd like to also consider funding in the proposed 2024 budget to expand the pilot project and add that additional camera between Vineland and Jordan to start focusing on the Jordan Road exit and the bypassing that could be happening in that location. And I'd also like to note when we're talking budgets here too, so our service provider, Rogers, they've actually offered to cover half the cost of this additional camera, just helping out with truck safety and truck traffic in Lincoln. So That's going to help us with our budget pressure, so that's good. I just wanted to highlight that. And obviously, we want to continue to collaborate and work together with MTO and the Niagara Regional Police, focusing on commercial vehicles avoiding the Vineland Truck Inspection Station. So at this point in time, I'd like to ask some of the MTO enforcement reps to come up, and they would like to make a few comments as it relates to the pilot program. And then maybe once the MTO reps have done that, we'll open it up for questions. Oh, that's okay. You can.
Madam Mayor, councillors, thank you for having us today. My name is District Enforcement Manager Nick Karakis. I'm the District Commander for Hamilton Niagara. A little bit of history about myself. I've got over 30 years of commercial vehicle background. So I started as a truck driver. Trucking was in the family. I actually owned a trucking company. I owned a truck school teaching truck drivers. And in 2012, I came over to the Ministry of Transportation and the enforcement branch and brought all my knowledge knowledge and skills over to this side, which has greatly helped kind of understanding both sides of the spectrum, the industry itself and the law enforcement side of it. 10 of those years, a short stint, I started in Sarnia, so I was an inspector in Sarnia and went up the ranks, became a sergeant in Vineland, and then finally a district manager, commander for the Vineland Truck Inspection Station. A little bit of information about the district. So we have approximately 20,000 trucks that go by the Vineland Inspection Station daily. So it's quite the busy corridor, U.S., U.S., Toronto, back and forth. We also, as far as the geographical area of the Hamilton Niagara District, it's Fort Erie to the Skyway Bridge in Burlington as far as east and west. And then we actually go as far out as Caledonia. So it's a big geographical area that we have approximately 14 skilled MTO officers that take care of. So it is a small amount of officers for a big geographical area, but we try our best to cover all those areas. As far as the Lincoln relationship with MTO, this relationship started back, I recall, in 2016, and it started as a simple request. Can you help us out with some signage? You know, we're having issues with trucks, and can we maybe put some signage in these locations? Can you help us enforce it? So it started back then, and then Hamilton Niagara team took it further, and we started putting officers out to patrol particular areas in assistance with your bylaw officers. And I want to emphasize something. You know, when I started with the ministry back in 2012, this was unheard of. It was MTO belongs on the highway. That's your mandate. You spend time, just like OPP, on the highway, and the municipalities take care of kind of their own stuff. I love how we've evolved, and the Auditor General's report that came out, MTO should be collaborating more with municipalities and police partners, as you can see, and that part I really like, because I truly believe our knowledge and our skill level can be shared, not just on highways, in municipalities as well. I have to give the council and this town kudos. This is the only known relationship between MTO and a municipality for this kind of an initiative across the province. So I can tell you that there is other municipalities that are kind of sitting back going, wow, maybe we should have some conversations, to get that kind of assistance in our communities, but this is the only relationship that we're working part and parcel to take care of these commercial vehicles that are coming off and avoiding inspection. I have Enforcement Supervisor Rob Kane here that has some information to share, and I also have Enforcement Supervisor Rob Morningstar that have some statistics that they'd like to share with you as well.
Thank you, Nick, and good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. Like Nick said, my name is Rob Kane, Enforcement Supervisor at the Vineland Truck Inspection Station. And I just want to share some sort of logistical statistics of what we've been doing in response to this. So with Caliber Communications, on average, we're seeing about anywhere between 10, 15, 20 emails a day of trucks that are bypassing. And so some days it could be zero, we're not getting anything. Other days we can be getting emails as much as up to 20 emails flagging trucks. And like we said earlier in the presentation, we start vetting it. We'll look at the truck. Sometimes it's a lot of like Dufferin and concrete trucks just going back to their yard on Bartlett. So we expect that. And then other times we can run license plates and verify whether or not they are in fact bypassing, and then go out and target them. An approximate guess of trucks coming from the Jordan area that are not being flagged right now, we would probably guess anywhere between 5 and 10 a day. That we would expect would be getting off prior to that, Jordan Road, 7th Street, and then potentially coming through and crossing at King Street, or heading down King Street. Some of the stats for our bypass blitz days that we've been doing with Niagara Regional Police. On average, when we're doing those days, we're inspecting between 25 to 30 commercial trucks that have been flagged as bypassing. When we're doing those inspections, we're seeing lots of defects. We've had trucks that have been impounded, pulled off the road. We're pulling license plates. When they're impounded, they're being seized by us and held for 15 days. Lots and lots of charges, lots and lots of violations. Some year-to-date stats, we've inspected 367 trucks since January that we've flagged as being on the bypass routes. Out of those 367 trucks, we've discovered 689 non-out-of-service defects, so that could just be any type of violation that you see. And then also 212 out-of-service violations, so things that we've actually held the vehicle for, pulled them off the road, and then potentially laid fines for. Like I said, some of those defects are impounded vehicles that we've taken. We've found cracked. Just on Friday, I stopped 2. Back to back, brought them back to the scale. The one was one break away from being impounded, and then the one that I inspected had multiple cracks on the suspension system. Both plates were pulled and those vehicles were taken off the road. So some really serious trucks running down on the bypass routes, with defective braking systems and things like that. So yeah, day-to-day operations, we're not solely relying on the cameras. We're using that as kind of our eyes on the ground. And that's kind of solidifying for us that when we do see a truck, we know that it is in fact bypassing. But we also will deploy officers out into the area. We'll sit in front of Always Convenience there and just monitoring trucks. We can sit there and do speed enforcement, and if we watch a truck come out of Jordan and head past us on King Street, we can pull that over. Same thing, if a truck turns right off Victoria Avenue, we can pull it over as well. And then, again, once we get the camera hits from Caliber and the emails, if resources allow, we'll deploy officers to try and intercept that vehicle and bring it back to the scale for the inspection. So it's been fruitful work, and we've been really appreciative of the camera system and what it's allowed us to do.
I just wanted to add one more thing to what Rob just said there. So basically what we have with these cameras is 2 officers. So you have an officer on Victoria, set of eyes. I classify them as officers. That's what they're doing. They're giving us the ability to screen without even leaving our inspection station. So we have an officer at Victoria, we have an officer on King Street. The eyes are on the commercial vehicles. So that's the equivalent of almost $180,000 in wages that, for me to take an officer and park them there and just say, stay there and provide that feedback and information to us. That's the value that those cameras are providing us, is being able to focus on our main duties on the highways and also have these officers sitting in those strategic locations for us to flag bypassing commercial vehicles. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, everyone. So I guess we're open for any questions committee may have.
Councillor Timmers?
Thank you very
Please
much.
go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Bernay, through you to the delegation. So I know the recommendation is to have a camera at the QEW exit at Jordan Road, or, I'm sorry, at King Street East. My thoughts are, wouldn't it make more sense to have it at the Jordan Road QEW? Because if they're avoiding at that point, coming through the hollow, and then we're picking them up on the camera on the east of King East, wouldn't it make sense to catch them before they come off and go through the hollow?
Thank you for your question, and yeah, that is something that we have discussed. The benefit of putting it at the location east on King Street is that we have now we can catch multiple routes, so we can encompass Jordan Road, 7th Street. I've stopped trucks that are doing deliveries on Van Sickle, 4th Avenue, and they've come down and gone all the way through King Street. So they're avoiding trying to get back onto the highway, and they're just saying, I'm gonna run King Street all the way along. So position-wise, strategically, it's more to try and capture sort of the broader spectrum of truck traffic.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Through you, Chair, I have another question. So recently on King Street, from Victoria Avenue along King Street, we have lowered the speed limit. And I don't know who wants to answer this one, but I'm just wondering, has that had any effect on trucks not wanting to go along King Street? Do you think that there's less trucks going because they don't want to travel at such a low speed?
I can answer that. I'm one of the speed enforcement instructors for the province, so I do speed enforcement all the time, and on King Street mainly when I'm up there. It hasn't deterred them at all. They still choose to run that route. They'll speed through it because I get them speeding all the time up there. But it's not a deterrent. They'd rather go slower and take longer than actually come through the scale and talk to us.
Oh, well, that's too bad. I was really hoping that would deter them. And that's my story when people are complaining about it being so slow. I like to talk about maybe it's deterring trucks, but I guess it's not.
Councillor Timmers, yeah, that is a great question, and when we brought our minister and we brought our delegates down and we took them for a tour, they were actually shocked how far a truck will go to get around us. So like we were literally driving and they're like, are you kidding me? Like they actually take this route to get away? If 45 minutes, even if it's an hour, just to avoid an inspection, they'll do it, and the speed won't have a bearing.
Well, I do believe that because I'm seeing a lot more trucks up in Camden, because that's where I live. Through you, Chair, I have one more question. It'd be my third question. If I can remember where I'm at now. Oh, around, that was to Mr. Karakas. One of your comments was that the town of Lincoln is the only municipality in a very large area that's actually partnering with MTO and for a number of years. And I'm wondering, how many inspection stations are there from Niagara to Hamilton?
So, Niagara to Hamilton or the province?
Are we're the only one?
So what we have, my district, we have lay-by inspection stations, which are little trailers. So you have one right at the border coming in, big green hut, and then you have another one that's at the Winona. So we have them coming eastbound or westbound, and we have them coming eastbound. So we are lucky. We have lots of the lay-bys, a full-blown inspection station here, brick and mortar. Some of our colleagues aren't as lucky to have that much attention on the highway, but there's 34 inspection stations across the province, all the way up to Kenora, Ontario. Some are very small, but yeah, there hasn't been maybe it's just, the managers or, the relationship building hasn't happened, but this is the only one that's in play right now that I know of.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Bernay.
Councillor Rinjima, please go ahead.
Well, there you go, it's working. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting. The second gentleman that spoke, sorry, what was your, right, I'm sorry, I didn't put your name down. I have a question for you. So you gave us a number, and it was an estimate of the number of trucks that you believe are traveling along, coming from the east side of Bartlett. You said something like 20 per day, you're thinking.
So on average, we're getting, Caliber Communications is sending us anywhere between like 10 to 20 emails of trucks that they're flagging that are exiting at Victoria Avenue and then hitting on the second camera, turning right onto King Street from Victoria Avenue. And then I said that we're guessing that there's probably on average anywhere between 5 to 10 trucks a day that are coming through Jordan, like on King Street, and then traveling straight through. But again, we don't have any statistical data on that. It's more of just kind of what we've been seeing and what we've been kind of feeling it has been happening. We don't have any way to kind of like statistically collect that data right now.
Yeah, so I was leading to a question about, so Green Lane, there's a traffic counter on Green Lane, and we know there's a certain amount of trucks that travel along Green Lane because you showed us that graph and said that 70 is a 17% increase when we know the lights are on. So we're expecting that there's maybe 20 or something per day that travel along there. Are we assuming that those are local trucks, or do we know anything about that at all?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, and if Dave wants to speak to that too. And I think part of even the data, and we were talking about it the other day, of trucks that are catching on that King Street is, it's trucks from all over. Like a lot of trucks will even still come down Victoria Avenue that are bringing, Victoria Avenue is a main hub of truck traffic. It's the main artery from Port Colborne, from the docks up there and coming down, and it can be. And we do see a lot of trucks that will come down and turn left onto King Street as well and head into Beamsville, which could also be potential bypassing, but I'll let Dave speak to that as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor, and just to your question on the Green Lane, I think you were mentioning. So some of the data that we've had an opportunity to collect on Green Lane. So we see about 25 trucks a day on Green Lane just as normal activity. And then when the scales go on, what we've seen so far is about 4 additional trucks per day when that happens. So just to kind of give you a feel for the amount of trucks on Green Lane.
So that's giving us an idea what the increase is when the lights go on.
Exactly.
Do we still know if all those are local? Do we think they're all local? Maybe some are just habitually avoiding the waste scale. I'm just wondering about the traffic on Green Lane. And then I have another question after that.
Yeah, so like I say, on Green Lane, when the scales aren't on, we have 25 trucks. When the scales are on, we're thinking it's about 4 additional per day.
But we don't know whether those are local trucks, or we really don't know. How could we know?
Don't know for sure, no.
Just curious, how could we
Or
know?
maybe.
Yes, please, thank you.
So just because of the previous driving truck and understanding the whole bypassing and why truckers do what they do, Green Lane is a high-risk bypass because it's too close to the inspection station, especially this time of year. This time of year, the leaves fall, and when we're looking out our inspection station through our glass window, we can see Green Lane. So we're starting to see trucks, and it's like, oh, they're going down Green Lane now.
Wow.
So they'll avoid the service road because then it's right out in front of us, and then they'll run Green Lane.
Oh.
You probably, if you want to check the stats, you might see Green Lane busier in the spring because of the foliage covers our view, but like you'll see less probably in the winter than you will in the summer. But that's the quicker way around. That's the quicker bypass is Green Lane. I don't think you're going to see big stuff on Green Lane because it's hard to make that turn. But it was the main bypass route is what we found, and now they're getting smart that they want to go up further and way away from us and then run King Street to avoid an interaction. And the other thing I'll mention, why do they bypass? Well, we know it's mechanical, we know it's weight, that's what we're finding. But the other interesting part is, you know, some truck drivers are very honest and they say, you folks scare us. I'd rather spend, there's nothing, and there's usually those folks, there's nothing wrong with their trucks. We sometimes find no defects. Why were you going around? Because we fear the MTO. They basically say that. I don't know if that answers your question.
That does, and it actually leads to my next question, which is, speaking with a couple of people who used to drive trucks for a living, you know all about that. I'm told that you're driving the truck, I don't care who owns the truck, if you own the truck or you're working for a company or you're working for a sole proprietor and you're driving their truck, the fine is on you as a truck driver, regardless. $2,000 if you haven't logged something properly or that kind of thing. So is that going to deter people? Absolutely. But is there anything that anybody's doing, big picture, to ensure, and I'm sure there is, but is there any sort of increase, is there any pressure being put on truck owners and companies to make sure that their trucks are in good shape? Because I know some of these drivers, from what I'm told, sometimes there's a situation in which they're driving their truck, there's something wrong with the truck, they know it, but nobody wants to fix it. And it's on them if they get pulled over and they have a $2,000 fine or a $5,000 fine. And
Yeah, so we're lucky in, you know, with the Highway Traffic Act and how we can actually lay charges. So we can lay charges to the driver, we
Yeah.
can lay charges to the company, and we can even lay charges to the shipper. The
Okay,
people that loaded the truck,
yeah,
right? Because when we're getting into the overweights and the gravel and stuff like that, we could lay charges to the shipper. So it's up to the officer what they're dealing with. If they feel it was a blatant disregard on the driver's behalf, then the driver's going to be charged, right? But if it's a maintenance-related issue, then we normally go after the company.
okay, interesting. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
We have built into the Highway Traffic Act a get-out-of-jail card for drivers with their trip inspection. So there's minor and major defects. They need to mark that down on their trip inspection report. If they do that, they won't be charged. We
Oh.
charge the operator at that point.
Sure, that makes
But
sense.
if they don't do that, then they're going to get charged and the operator's going to get charged.
Yeah,
If that
you have to
makes
do your
sense.
inspection and
Yeah, so we
record it.
recognize that, and we do hold the drivers accountable, and we hold the operators accountable, but the drivers need to tell the operator what the defects are, and they do that through their trip inspection report. So
Okay.
if we find the defect and it's not on that report, then they'll get charged also.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, just if I can add one more comment to that too. Your question was, is there something that is being done to try and cause compliance, like for the companies to do that? And in Ontario, every commercial operating business has to run a CVOR license. And anytime that we do an inspection or lay charges or things like that, they collect CVOR points. It's kind of similar to like your driver's license, you'll collect demerit points. We have a license that every operator in Ontario has to have. And so one of the things is that they want to be in compliance, and they want to invest money because they don't want to have the CVOR points, because then we can start leading into sanctions through audits and things like that, and canceling people's ability to operate in Ontario. So, yeah. Or insurance rates can go up, things like that too. So there is some stuff that we do to try and force companies to maintain their fleet.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, a couple questions. First of all, thank you, Dave, to you and your team to bringing all this data and collecting it and bringing it forward. Again, it's amazing to see the difference when those the lights are on and they're going around and trying to get around. It's again, I'm curious to see what this is going to be year over year, to see if you actually see a decline in behavior, but again, that will remain to be seen. I'm just wondering again, so again, for lack of a better term, we have a net here that we are using to try to catch the scofflaws trying to get away around from the way station, and we are looking to expand that a little bit further east into Jordan. How long do you think it would be until truckers, again, are fully aware of the parameters of the net, and then again start bypassing the net itself and going up Victoria, in through Camden, all like, is that going to be, again, and you kind of mentioned it, that it is always surprising to see how far they will drive to get away from the MTO. I know you guys are actually seem pretty nice, but like how far will they go to get around these nets, and will these nets eventually become maybe it'll protect Lincoln itself, which is what we all want here, but maybe it'll just shift the burden to some other municipalities around us. Any ideas?
Yeah, so I can answer that. It's already happening. So the drivers, they talk, and they know if they get off Victoria Avenue and they go up to King Street, they're getting stopped. So now we're getting repeat offenders we've stopped before, and they're on Green Lane, or they're up on Fly Road, or they're going, taking other routes, because they know if they take Victoria Avenue and they take King Street, they're gonna get caught. They don't know why, but they know they get caught all the time. So it's already had that effect. That's why it's also important to set up bigger nets, and, because now they won't know. If we get multiple routes, they won't know what to do, right? Now they know if they get off Victoria Avenue, they take King Street, they get caught, so they're not taking King Street anymore, but we're still catching them on Ontario Street. So whatever route they took, they didn't flag the system, but we recognize them from before and we stop them.
Okay. Thank you. Another follow-up, Mr. Chair? And again, I'm not sure the system itself, but is it modular at all that you could move what is existing around? Again, I'm not saying we shouldn't add more, but like, do we have the possibility, if right now it's on the corner of King and Victoria, to sometimes move it to Green Lane and Victoria? And again, have that net shifting so they don't really know where it is going to be able to catch them, and then that kind of keeps them on their toes a little more. Or maybe a little more honest and go through the scales like they should.
Good question, Councillor. They are somewhat portable, the cameras, but they are hardwired, so there are some power supply issues we would have to look at, switching the cameras around. But it's definitely something we can consider for sure as we get sort of more trends and, really monitor the situation. I think that's key here. With that map I showed you, we're trying to, look at zones and trying to gain a better understanding of that. And yeah, it may make sense to move a camera to another location, so.
Thank you. And last quick question, Mr. Chair, through you. I can't remember which one mentioned, but someone mentioned about the ones that are pulled off the road, they're given fines, sometimes they are suspended. How many of those are repeat offenders down the road that after they've faced whatever penalty they face for going around, or again, some deficiency with their truck, how often do they come back with a similar issue, or are caught avoiding the scales again with either another truck with other deficiencies? Like, is that something that occurs regularly?
So what we're finding is they don't necessarily do it because they want to. It's a money issue, right? So truck safety was much better before COVID. And when COVID struck, it was hard on the industry, and now they're cutting corners again. So now we're back to trucks we found 10 years ago, we're finding now again. So it's not so much that they want to do it, but if we catch them again, yeah, for sure we catch them in the future again. Either they can't afford to do it, or they're just a bad actor and they don't want to do it, right? But we find a lot of times it's just that they can't afford to do what they need to do, but they shouldn't be operating on our roads that way either, so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Got something to add to that, Councillor, too. So we have our own statistics branch, SPEB, it's called, Ministry of Transportation. And one of the items, which was very interesting, we have guest speakers that speak to us from that branch. They said, usually when a person gets a charge, I write you that ticket, the chances of reoffending, 2 years. Is what they found. So, and that's why we say to our staff, like, if it's better to write the charge, because that's how you're going to drive change, as opposed to the warning. The warnings don't drive change, the charge drives change.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Michalak.
Thank you, Chair Brunei, through you to the delegation. Thank you for coming. Yeah, it was an interesting summer for myself and Councillor Chair Brunei. We had an opportunity to visit your inspection station during a blitz, and I don't know how many times I've driven by that building, and I've always wondered, what's going on in there? What is this? I could not believe the technology that is located in that building and what you're able to do and see. Speaking to the officers that we had a chance to talk to, there was this positive feeling and vibe and this excitement that we were there as councillors to hear the stories and to thank us for what we've been doing to date with regards to these traffic cameras, complimenting us on the how much easier it makes your jobs. And it was great to hear. It really made me feel good to hear. And it's not just in Vineland. It was also in London when we were again, Chair Brunei and I, we happened to bump into a deputy minister of transportation, and we were talking about, our recent visit to this inspection station. And he himself had even mentioned about what a wonderful program this is, and how thankful, how excited he was to hear and learn more about it, and wanting to implement this in other jurisdictions as well. So I commend council as well as yourselves for making this the success that it is. Question I have is, with this success and with the budget pressures that we're having, and all municipalities, and wanting to keep that inspection station and not having to look at it with eyes of this causes us a lot of headache. Is there an opportunity to advocate to the province, to the Ministry of Transportation, for funding to assist us in financing these sorts of initiatives that we're working on and having to take on ourselves?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, our main objective is we want to work through this pilot, look at the success, get feedback. But yeah, moving forward, I think those conversations are all valid for sure. So, yeah.
Through you, and I asked that question because it's 34 grand, 35 grand, and some may not think it's a lot, but it is a lot, especially when we're hearing that, through Councillor Russell's question, that there's the potential for greater avoidance, and a greater need for this sort of technology that is tough for a council like ourselves to fund. So if we could do that, I think that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Pachariba.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Bernay. Thank you again for coming tonight. This was very, very interesting. Couple questions. So, talked about avoidance. And yeah, you know what? I think they are going up a little bit higher. So Thursday night at the golf course, 4 carriers rolled across Bethesda Road, all from the same company, U.S. company. I took a picture and actually sent it to Director Graham, who flipped it to you guys, and it was either, and you know what, and my mother has these, it's either avoiding the scale or they're up to no good with something. Maybe they've got contraband. You know what are you coming down Bethesda Road in these 48-foot trailers in Tamden, all right? And so, when you talk, so the lights come on and you guys do the inspection. How long does that typically take?
Well, we have various levels of inspections that we do. We do a full mechanical fitness, which we call a level 1 inspection.
Okay.
That could be an hour or better. For dangerous goods, we could be up to 2 hours, 3 hours.
Okay, so that's the rationale for the avoidance.
No, the rationale for the avoidance is Ontario's got one of the toughest commercial vehicle law enforcement program in North America.
Okay.
Our penalties are strong compared to other jurisdictions, and they're just scared of getting caught by us.
Okay. Well, and you guys are doing your jobs properly, because, there was a time when we heard those incidences of truck wheels flying off. Right? Can't remember the last one I've heard. Thank God, right? So, ticketing. Now, you're able to give tickets for speeders. Rob, you
Yeah, we hold the powers under the HTA.
Okay.
Very similar to what the police powers are. They have some powers we don't have, and we have some powers they don't have, but relatively, we're on the same plane.
Okay, and this is scaring me, because I'm kind of going down the path of Councillor Mikluck, but I'm gonna take a different tack. So we've got a partnership here, and it may be that we at AMO or Roma or OCRA advocate for increase in these fines, and then maybe a little bit gets chipped off to the municipality. We'll take the fine route. So maybe that's something we can do, as doing the pilot, saying the success of the program. Let's increase it, right, to really hit these scofflaws in the pocketbook, because you know what? They're doing a disservice to everyone. I mean, I drive about 60,000 kilometers a year on the road and see these. And years ago, you used to only be able to drive a truck on Sunday if you were perishable. But that's not the case anymore, is it?
No, you can drive a truck 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
So that's what we kind of try to catch in our scheduling. I mean, MTO's no different than any other thing. Our FTEs are hard to find nowadays, so we used to run 24/7 in Vineland. We don't do that anymore, but that's just reality of the financial constraints now, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, so, yeah, anything, like the cameras, they work for our officers because, again, we're half the complement we used to be, but we're still doing the work because we can use that camera to, I don't have to send one of my officers up to sit on King Street for hours waiting for a truck, when they can sit at the scale, do their job, and then something flags and I send them up. And they just go down to the bean zone, wait for them, and we pull them back and bring them in.
One of the things I wrote, the two cameras save $180,000 in wages. So that's awesome. So thank you again. Thanks for the presentation. Keep doing the good work, guys, because you know what? You're making not only the province safe, but our community. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mary Stin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I mean, this really is music to all of our ears, and it wouldn't be nearly as terrific a story if we didn't have you as partners. There's just no question about it. So just to go back a bit, we really were having a lot of trouble with public safety in our community, and we just weren't making the kind of progress that we felt that we should be able to make. And it is important to have roads that will move goods and services, but it doesn't mean that that's a license to operate in an unlawful way. And so controlling your own jurisdiction controlling your own area within your jurisdiction is essentially what we're doing. But because we're not law enforcement agencies in this regard, we really needed your assistance. I had a conversation with Minister Mulroney, and basically it was, if that scale is going to be there, the scale has to do the job that it's been put there for. And therefore, we have to have officers that are working with us in order to make sure that the scale is able to do its job. Otherwise, if trucks are going to avoid it and come into our communities, this is really creating a big problem in terms of wear and tear on our roads, as well as safety issues at some of the corners that are particularly difficult for some of the big trucks. There was a truck that I saw come in a few Saturdays ago from Texas, and it is absolutely the biggest truck I've ever seen in my whole life. And there it was, trying to make a right turn on Ontario Street. It was just incredible. So I'm going a little bit in the same direction as Councillor Pachariva, and he was talking a little bit about contraband. But I am really wondering if this is an opportunity to discover guns, cigarettes, drugs, and even trafficking. So I don't see anybody here from the border crossing officers. But is there an opportunity here for including other law enforcement agencies where there could be other types of inspections going on if a truck is stopped, or if through the AI features or any other techniques that you have, that there could be, this provides another opportunity to pick up some dangerous characters, or maybe they don't even know what's in the trucks themselves. Surely this is on your mind. I can't believe it isn't. If you could talk about it even in very general terms, it would be very valuable.
Yeah, so we know contraband comes across, it comes through our scales. We've got human smuggling in Vineland, we've got tobacco, drugs, you name it, we've stopped it in Vineland. Now, we're unique in our powers is because we're regulatory, we can enter a vehicle without a warrant. Once we find that bad thing, we have to close it up, seal it, and then we call the police in. They're the ones that deal with the criminal side of everything, but they need a warrant to enter at that point. So we're unique because we're regulatory. We don't need warrants to enter vehicles, but once we find something, we have to back out. So police are our main backup, but we do bring border in when we find something that's crossed the border illegally or something like that. But they lose a lot of their powers once they're away from the port, right? So they're still interested and they'll bring them back to the port, but we do work with other agencies also. I mean, obviously NRPS, our relationship with them has grown tenfold over the last few years. But we also deal with Canada Customs, stuff like that, RCMP, OPP.
So do you think that we're developing the right kind of an image here in terms of this is not a place to fool around with? This isn't you're just going to find yourself in big trouble if you avoid the scales? Is that message getting across, or are they just going to continue to push the envelope?
Well, I think the message is getting across because we know that they are moving different routes now, right? But our officers are also smart and they roam different areas. We have routes, pinch points where we can go to and we'll stop vehicles and we'll check to see if they flagged in the system. They didn't flag in the system, but we know they're rolling around. So yeah, the word is out there. Vineland holds a reputation for being very tough. We have truck drivers that come up in the States, they don't even come near it. We stop them, they start crying. Like, we've done nothing to them, it's just our reputation, right? But we are a tough scale and we like to keep it that way and we keep things in order, right?
Well, it's certainly to our benefit that that you're out there looking after our interests. Thank you.
Oh, yes, sorry, Madam Mayor, as my colleague Rob was saying, we do partner up with the RCMP, and the RCMP actually has in Niagara-on-the-Lake an X-ray truck. So they actually bring it down to take part in our blitzes, so they go ahead and start X-raying vehicles when we bring them back, looking for guns, et cetera, that may be hidden compartments where maybe drugs could be hidden. So these relationships at one time weren't really happening. In today's day and age, yes, like we have the relationships with NRP, we have RCMP, we have Border, we have Halton Police that comes down and joins us for our initiatives down here because we're such a big inspection station. So when we do these blitzes, we kind of open up the floodgates to have more hands on deck to assist us in this area. And I can tell you, we do way more, the number 5 that you've seen there, we don't offer that to the other community. Like we haven't been approached by other communities, but we don't do blitzes in Welland. We don't do those kind of blitzes in Port Colborne. We're not doing those kind of blitzes as much as we're doing here in this community. Just wanted to share that.
Right, and that was my understanding. Well, I want to make it very clear to any members of the public that are watching, Mr. Chairman, that the concern of this council is public safety. You are public safety agencies, and so therefore, it's a very complementary relationship. Our investment is to make sure that you can do better work for us. It's not because we are changing our mandate or that we're going off in directions that are not focused. It just happens that there's a number of people that are involved in achieving the same goals. I'd like to hear from the Staff Sergeant Lamasha as well in regard to the role of NRPS and if there's anything in particular, any impact that it has on the service that they're able to provide us.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. With respect to the Niagara Regional Police Service, and it was alluded to before, it isn't just a Niagara Regional Police Service initiative. We've also relied on our community policing partners and had officers present from the Hamilton Police Service, Halton Police Service, Ontario Provincial Police, Niagara Parks Police from the Falls area. They've also come out to give in our assistance. And speaking from our agency directly, we involve officers from our local 8 district, which is my district command, which involves the town of Lincoln, West Lincoln, and Grimsby. As well, we also pull in the majority of, if not all of our traffic enforcement units that are working the day we conduct blitzes. As well, I know we've involved our corporate communications unit, and they've worked hand in hand and collaboratively with the town of Lincoln corporate communications, because to go out and do these blitzes is excellent and provides enforcement, making our roads safer. But I think part of the information needs to get out to let the public know that we're doing these blitzes, what the results are, the number of trucks we've taken off the road, the types of violators that we've seen from no insurance, no license, terrible mechanical defects that results in the truck being impounded and removed from the road immediately. And if we take those steps and share that to the community through our various platforms, I think that's important, that it shows the community the type of work that we're doing, the collaboration that we're able to bring together, and in my opinion, the outstanding results that we've achieved.
Thank you. Thank you to all my colleagues for the great questions, and thank you very much for being here this evening. I'm glad Mayor Easton asked that question of Staff Sergeant Lemich, because I can remember back in, I think it was 2014, maybe 2015, we started floating this out to Staff Sergeant at that time, Neil Orlando. And I know he took it very seriously, and he was able to come up with the resources to do one of these blitzes, and to think that 9 or 10 years later we're doing 5 and counting is certainly great news. And seeing those statistics of the violations and the vehicles we're pulling off the road, it is really interesting. I spent 40 years working for a company that had about 60 locations with about 600 trucks on the road, and we used to avoid the MTO like it was the plague, and here we are now, doing great work. So it's interesting to see how things evolve. But
I was an avoider as well.
Yeah. But when you understand that the MTO can be also your friend, and work with you, and be someone that you can be working with rather than avoiding, you can do good things. So thank you very much, and thank you, Director Graham and Diane, for the work that you're doing on this. So, seeing no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Rinjema that we receive and file report PW 10-23 regarding the truck bypass camera monitoring pilot project update. And now we'll ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. Thank you. That vote closes and that carries. Thank you.
Mary Easton, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that...
Sorry, Chair. We just need to turn Mayor Easton's microphone on. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that the recommendation to send this to the budget process is well understood. It wasn't included in the motion, but...
It was not, and I will going to just maybe ask our CEO to maybe make a comment with regards to the mayor's question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor, absolutely. Madam Mayor, this is a conversation that we've already had, and it is included in our 2024 budget that we'll be presenting to council.
Councilor Patriva?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bernay. Through you to maybe Mr. Graham, yourself and Vice Chair Mikulik got the opportunity to go down and see firsthand on a blitz. Wondering if the rest of council might get that opportunity at some point, because it sounds pretty interesting. And Councilor Russell and I were just saying we'd love to be near that X-ray truck, because that sounds pretty cool. We'll run it for you for the day if you let us.
So certainly, yeah, we'd love to have you all out if available. So we will be reaching out to our police partners early in the year for our blitz setup, so we can share the dates. And David.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to doing 7 blitzes in 2024. So we now have concluded the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda, and we will now allow Councillor and Chair Lynn Timmers to assume the chair at this time for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda.
Great, thank you, everyone. We're now at our general business and finance portion of the agenda. We have no delegations, and we are now considering a report FN-13-23 regarding investment update. Do members of committee have any questions? Councillor Mikulik? No? Okay, let's try again. It's not working, clerk. Just tap it. Maybe
There we go.
There we go. Okay. I'm used to having to hold it, so sorry, that's my fault here.
Thank
Okay,
you.
go ahead, Councillor Mikulik, you have a question.
Yep, through you to our Director of Finance. Yeah, thank you for this report. Thank you for detailing and sharing what's being planned or proposed. Just curious, it's frustrating when you have to cash a GIC or an investment of any sort. Do we have a policy or do we have a procedure in how we determine the amount of time that we make these sorts of investments?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Through you to
Specifically,
Ms.
where we tie up our funds, why, how we tie up our funds and for the length of time we do so.
Okay, thank you. Through you to Charlotte. Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Chair, to the councillor. We do have an investment policy, and that investment policy outlines that we will invest along the yield curve. So we typically stagger the investments as best we can to try to predict when those funds will be needed for capital projects. As the organization's maturing and as we're gaining more information, we're doing more forecasting, we develop a better understanding of what that timing is. And sometimes there can be a slight mismatch, but we do generally follow that policy, and so we try to have staggered maturity dates.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I just, I know there's certain investments that are made, and there's a greater return on investment for the longer period of time that you tie up or invest money for. It's just my concern is that when interest rates are low, tying money up for an extended period of time may not necessarily make sense, where when interest rates are higher, it perhaps might. So that's the concern, and that's why I bring this question up at this time, that in the future, maybe we look at how we tie up our money to get the best rate of return, and that we don't handcuff ourselves or penalize ourselves for having to do so when that time may come unexpectedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Sorry, I can't see you across the room, so I couldn't see if your mic was on or off. I'm going to refer back to Ms. Tunakaitis for a comment on those last comments.
Yes, through you, Chair, to the councillor. I think that's, definitely something that we take into consideration when we're investing. I know, for example, for the trust funds, we do have monies that are available for investment right now, and there are good interest rates right now. For the trust funds, I likely will invest them longer term because we typically only pull from the interest and the investment revenue on the trust funds, but that's definitely something that we look at when we're making our investment decisions.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer. Receive and file report FN-13-23 regarding the investment update. We'll now ask the Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We are now considering report LS-09-23 regarding the 2024 meeting schedule for council and committees. Do members of committee have any questions? see Councillor Russell. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to planning, Mr. Bruder. Looking at the report, it states that, again, the change in the schedule will allow us to meet the obligations by changes in certain bills. What are we not meeting now by our current schedule?
Through to Mr. Bruder.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. It would be moving forward. Typically, as we've gone through the planning process to date, we've had, an open house and a statutory public meeting, then a recommendation report. But now the timelines have been shortened moving forward as of this summer. And as a result, for kind of some of the more complex applications, there's not the opportunity to do all of that, plus all the submissions and all the back and forth within those shorter timelines that are associated with Bill 109. So now we've been undertaking a little bit of a different process, which I'm going to present to you later. But we've been doing some of that work now, but really what it essentially allows us to do is be more nimble with having the availability of more committee meetings so we can move things through faster, which is, again, in line with the faster timelines. So, again, we've already implemented this new practice where we front load a lot of the work on planning applications, so we've mitigated that slightly, but still, just to give us more opportunity as we get busier with planning applications, it gives us an opportunity for more meetings to bring things forward quicker.
So thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So is the plan then, again, we're going to have the sole Planning Ec Dev Committee of the whole meeting by itself, but should the opportunity be required, PED would be added on to regular Committee of the whole meetings as well?
Who wants, I'm looking at.
I can take that, thanks, Chair.
Go
Through
ahead,
you.
Van.
The intent is to have Planning and Economic Development Committee as a separate meeting, and that would always be a separate meeting. GBF and CSI would remain as one, and then that additional tentative meeting that's in the schedules would be used for example, a workshop or any one of those Committee of the Whole meetings, special counsel or council.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. So we're not increasing the number of planning meetings throughout the year. It's just going to be the existing, but they're going to be by themselves.
Through you, Chair, yes, that is the intent. Should we need more meetings, they will be available to us in your calendars as a tentative hold.
Okay, so follow up. Do we not have that availability now? Like, I'm trying to read, I read the report saying that this will allow us to meet certain obligations, but if we're not changing or adding more meetings in as far as planning itself, and that we're essentially holding more or less one meeting a month for planning, it's just broken out by itself. I don't really see what the efficiency is.
So through you, Chair, to Councillor Russell, the intent is to have that meeting in case we need to have a planning meeting or a GBF meeting. For example, we have seen currently that applications have come forward and we've had to shift reports to other meetings to accommodate the planning and statutory requirements. So we have built those in tentatively should we need them. And Matt, do you have any follow-up to that?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think what's being proposed here is yet to separate out the planning items, in part too, just because in terms of timelines and things like that, sometimes with planning applications, we don't get certain things that we need to include until the 11th hour. It gets late to bring stuff forward at any given meeting, so we need a little bit more flexibility. But I think what's happened is we've pulled out the planning meeting, but we've also put in an additional meeting during the month that can be used. I think it can be used for planning, but any other committee items too as needed. So I think that kind of extra meeting is a little bit multi-purpose. I think with planning at top of mind, just because we need that flexibility, but it could be utilized for other things too as needed. That's my understanding of what we're proposing.
Okay, so sorry, I don't see anybody else in the queue, so can I ask one more question, Madam Chair?
Okay, go ahead.
So then we are then creating the opportunity for additional planning meetings, and that's what I was trying to get to. Like, if we're just moving it by itself, that doesn't really create efficiency, but if we're creating the opportunity for when we do need planning, then that makes more sense.
Through you, Chair, yes, that is correct, Councilmember. Councilmember Russell, however, keeping in mind that tentative meeting won't solely be just for planning items. It could be for a workshop, it could be for special counsel, whatever is needed at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Patrick Riva, receive and file for information report LS-09-23 regarding the 2024 meeting schedule for council and committees, and approve the 2024 meeting schedules as outlined in Appendix A and Appendix B of the report, and direct staff to amend procedural bylaw 2022-04 as amended, as outlined in report LS-09-23. I will now ask our clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And that vote carries, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There being no additional items to consider, we have now concluded the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We are now going to rotate to allow Councillor and Chair J.D. Pachariva to assume the chair at this time for Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Can I turn my mic off?
We're just switching the queue for you to chair. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So I was too fast.
You were too fast. You are good to go. Thank you.
How's that? Excellent. Okay, so we're now at the Planning and Economic Development portion of tonight's agenda. We have no delegations. So our reports, 9.2, we will consider report PD 38-23, Planning Departmental Update Report for 2023. Our Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Matt Bruder, will be providing a presentation, and Matt alluded to this in his earlier comments. So Matthew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleased to be before all of you tonight. I wanted to give a little bit of insight into the planning department, looking at some of the trends, how things have been going, giving an overview of the departmental function, and looking at, again, some of what we've been seeing in 2023 and even years prior to that as they compare. Highlighting some of the workload of the Planning and Development Department. As you know, we undertake a variety of activities, from initial consultation with homeowners, with developers looking to establish what they can and can't do on their properties, looking at keeping up to date with all different forms of legislation and the updates that are happening there, and then looking at other items as well, such as site alterations and looking at other long-term strategic planning. So with that, just speaking more from a development application processing standpoint, there's a variety of steps that staff typically undertake. A lot of these even before the prospective applications come before council, come to the public, looking at pre-application meetings where an additional concept's run by us. There's an opportunity for back and forth. We try to guide what can and can't happen based on the applicable frameworks in place, based on the town, the character, and all of those things. After which, that goes into a little bit more of a formal pre-consultation meeting. And then we get into, after that, where there's the full-on application submission, coordination of public input, ongoing collaboration with the developer, back and forth, bringing the statutory public meeting requirement before council, and finally forming a recommendation. So a lot of work going into the overall planning application processing. And again, this relates to a variety of applications we're talking about, ranging from Committee of Adjustment applications, variances, consents, to zoning bylaw amendments, official plan amendments, draft plans of subdivision, and condominium plans, and all of those things. So here's just a high-level overview of the department as it stands now. The last time we added any planning staff was right around the time where we approved the Prudhoe secondary plan. That was back in 2018. Since then, we've really seen a boom in terms of planning application volumes, a lot of development forming in the pipeline for potential realization later on. But again, just highlighting that this particular organizational framework from the building standpoint, I've been here since 2016. It's the same amount of staff as it was when I started processing that high volume of work coming forward. And then again, for the past 5 years, working with this particular framework on the planning side, which I'm proud to say I think punches well above its weight when it comes to application processing and all the things that we've had to do, keeping up with all the policy updates that have been pretty hot and heavy over the past number of years. Getting a little bit into some of the comparisons, how things have been looking this year, years prior. And again, this is also part of a report that's also coming tonight on building permit activity, but they kind of dovetail together, so we thought we'd present a little bit on that. Construction values over the past couple of years in 2022, a little bit lower than what we'd been experiencing, but then again, in the years prior to that, was unusually high. I think 2021 was our record, up around $180, $190 million construction value. That was extreme in terms of volume. And then 2019 was also high. But still, I would note that this particular number here in 2022 still exceeds the average of the 5 years before when this boom took place, still representing a significant figure. And looking at 2023, we're slightly under that now as of September 30th, coming in at around 70 million in construction value. But by the end of the year, I'm confident that we'll likely achieve a higher value than we did in 2022. Variety of factors obviously at play lately. We've been seeing with higher interest rates, higher lending rates. It's more difficult now for prospective developers to secure financing. So all this is leading to a little bit of a slowdown in terms of actual building being realized and permits being pulled. But we are still sustaining a fairly high volume, notwithstanding those conditions, which I think is a testament to the development climate here in Lincoln, that it remains strong even during these times. Going a little bit further into the residential units, and this is more to kind of highlight for you the development pipeline that we have. You see here, there's two columns in this table. One's the total units. That's relatively recent, not necessarily confined to 2022 or 2023. Those would have included some of our larger subdivisions too that are largely built out now. But these large numbers here are driven by some of the more major developments, obviously the first of all being Prudhome's, and these include the amount of residential units that have been draft approved or there's land use permissions in place. Doesn't include others that we know are at the very high level conceptual stages or that will be coming in the near future. And really the importance of this is to just kind of highlight the shift in density forms, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. They've been forecasted for a while in the regional official plan and all that work that's been undertaking. We're dominated by single family detached dwellings, whereby now we're going to see a little bit of growth in multi-unit dwelling types. But I also think it's important to note that the development pipeline remains significant. Again, notwithstanding some of these market conditions that are out of anybody's control and ones that are being felt across all municipalities, I think this shows that there still is quite a bit of development that is in the pipeline and can be realized either over the slow term, over 2024, we expect some to come in, and then as conditions improve, we'll see more. From a planning application standpoint, now this again includes a variety of planning applications, even things such as property information requests. But when I look at the amount of applications we received in 2023, the number remains significant, a little bit lower overall than what we'd been seeing in the previous years, higher than 2020. So again, even though you might be hearing that things are slowing down, we're still receiving quite a bit of planning applications, quite a few pre-consultation applications, some of which are pretty significant from a land use development standpoint. Again, just to show that we remain busy in planning, and this isn't even getting into some of the other items that I'm going to talk about in terms of endeavors and updates that we need to complete. So getting into some of those things, some of the other items outside of processing development applications. I've been in front of you many times. I'm not going to go ahead and rehash all of the different bills and policy updates that have come forward and what we need to do as a result of those, but they have implications, obviously, for updating our parkland dedication bylaw, our official plan, our zoning bylaw, all these things we've had to stay on top of and make sure we're dynamic and we're fluid as we consider development applications, because again, the policy framework is constantly in flux and constantly changing. This goes a little bit further to some of the earlier dialogue. The previous report, we were considering, Councillor Russell, your question about timelines and what we're doing to meet timelines, and if we are. This graphic I found helpful to kind of visualize what we've done in terms of how we've, for lack of a better term, front-loaded the application process. It used to be a complete application was measured by simply meeting the submission requirements that were identified in the pre-consultation. Wasn't a lot of detail otherwise in evaluating the quality and content of those submissions, just whether or not they were there. Now we've added a whole additional diligence process at the start whereby, you know, we go through these pre-meetings, we have early conversations, then we come to pre-consultations, but not only do we just identify what the submissions are, could be anything from, you know, a traffic assessment to a functional servicing report, but we actually now have terms of reference in place that detail the content and what needs to be included in those for them to be acceptable. We also try to iron out a lot of what we see as design challenges or other issues right at the start before we get into the actual processing of the application, knowing now time is limited to do that during the process. Another thing that we've changed is now we require a developer-hosted community information meeting to be held as a component of a complete application. So that's kind of in place of the informal open house we used to have during the actual application process. We now require it to be front and center, upfront, before anything's submitted. And we use that as an opportunity as well for further back and forth with a prospective developer or property owner to refine their concept before it even comes to us for processing. So again, more diligence at the front of the process before we actually deem it complete, because that technically starts the clock ticking, and by which then we're limited to deal with some of those matters. So just, again, going through very quickly some of the initiatives within the department on top of all the other items that I've mentioned. We're currently undertaking in-house an official plan review. We would normally outsource something like that. Many municipalities do. They engage a consultant when it comes to updating their policy documents. We did with the zoning bylaw. However, with the official plan, we're going to leverage internal staff expertise. We want to make sure that we're assessing all of the policy updates that have come down from the province in terms of what they mean to Lincoln. We've all divided up tasks, different sections of the official plan, and we're going to be coming together to provide a consolidated update that takes into account all the policy changes. That should be coming to you relatively soon. We had initially forecasted end of this year, might be very beginning next year. It requires a statutory public meeting. We've had to deal with community benefits charge policy updates because that's in place of what was formerly Section 37 agreements, which I know we're all familiar with. Those are no longer the case. There's new rules now that allow us to impose community benefits charges on high-density developments. So we're going through that study now. That should be coming forward shortly, as will Parkland Dedication Bylaw Update and the associated official plan amendment. Again, Bill 23 has made changes to how we collect parkland and cash in lieu of parkland, what the rates are, and the types of land that we're able to accept. We've initiated work on review of tree protection policies and all associated documentation. We'll be working quickly as per council's motion to make sure that we come back with some updates, working with the working group. Short-term accommodations, just recently had the public meeting. It's in staff's hands to come back after hearing input, coming back to council with a recommendation. And then we've got a couple items here pertaining to heritage. Again, working through designations to the best of our ability and looking at the heritage, the results of the first phase of the Heritage Conservation District study. The last item is the Ontario Street Urban Design Vision Streetscape Master Plan. We did develop that plan, those guidelines, but now working with the region just to develop that overall demonstration plan and finalize some of the guidelines that are associated with that to give a better visual aid. That's kind of the final step as we outlined when that came forward. So we have engaged with the region's urban design group, and we're working on bringing forward an update in that regard as well. So just hopefully that provides you with a snapshot of where things are, all things planning, and how the department functions, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Councillor Timmer, start us off, please.
Thank you, Chair Patrieva. Through you to Director Bruder. So one thing that jumped out at me was the new mandatory requirement for a developer that they host the public information session and that they would gather the public input and then provide strategies on how to, address those comments and concerns. Where does that fit with our staff who did that piece? Like, I'm not sure. Like, is there a follow-up? Will staff be making recommendations as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, they will. So how it works is, it is a developer kind of led public meeting, but we assist in all the organization. We make sure that they've got the appropriate circulation lists and all of those things. We make sure we review all the notices that go out. And we're also going to be present at those meetings as well. And really, the intention is to record the input that's received that early on, and then use that as an opportunity to engage in dialogue with the developer before the application's even submitted formally. And through that, yeah, there might be some recommendations on how we refine or improve a concept. That is the idea. But again, it's kind of in place of that kind of non-formal open house that we used to have as part of the development process. It's the same sort of idea, but earlier on in the process, a little bit more developer-led. And then with us liaising with them early. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I just found it interesting when I was reading it, how it was going to work. So through you, Chair, I've got another couple of questions. So I know that staff are reviewing and updating many policies, and you're communicating with council on a regular basis, as well as providing comments to the province. Have you seen or heard any kinds of changes around the heritage piece? Or is that's it? That's what we've got? I just can't believe that other municipalities and, around us are not reaching out with comments, because it's so restrictive. Have you got anything new there, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing new, but I can tell you that every other municipality is struggling with the same issues that we are from a resource and timing standpoint. Agree, it's onerous, it's difficult, but I haven't heard any revisions to what's been brought forward to date.
Okay, I was hoping you had some. Hoping you had some good news for us on that, Director Bruder. And just my last comment, Chair Patrieva. Around the delegated authority and the planning piece, the delegated authority will now be to the municipalities and not the region. So I'm just wondering how that piece is going to work as well. And will the region still be, there'll still be a commenting agency? Is that what will happen? They will now be just commenting, or I'm not sure. Maybe you can comment on it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's a part of Bill 23 that hasn't been proclaimed quite yet, so it's not in place. So the region still functions at the moment how they did, but how it's proposed, when it does come forward and when it is proclaimed, is that, yes, the regional role in planning is not going to be there anymore. So what that means for us is we'll have to assimilate their official plan into ours, which we're doing as part of a conformity exercise that I was just talking about now anyways, to a point. But really, the responsibility will then fall to the town. Now, how does that look with the region and how they continue to participate? Well, a lot of municipalities, not just us, but others in Niagara, from a resource standpoint, there still could be some pinch points. I think from an environmental impact study point of view, things like that there still is a need for some services from the region. So the talk has been that there's going to be working towards some service level agreements whereby they're kind of tailored to more of the needs of the municipality, still covered through development application fees, like the cost would be borne by the developer. But for some of those things that maybe municipalities such as us that don't have in-house expertise on, the region will still provide that assisting role. But again, it will be us that will be solely running the development application processing process with reaching out to them for supports. That's how it would work going forward.
And with the tighter timelines on everything, right? How you're going to organize that, but thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to Director Bruder. Matt, I'm looking at slide number 8, and that's your changes in process. So the previous process where we started with the pre-consultation meeting and goes all the way down to the recommendation and report, and then the new process fits the same space in your slide. But I'm wondering, I recognize the bottom piece, the green piece of the new process is now much more condensed. The entire process, though, from top to bottom, is it still around the same length of time, or is the entire process condensed?
That's a good question, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. So overall, obviously the goal is try to expedite. We always try to expedite and streamline as much as we can. So the hope is with this new process, the way we're structuring it is that things will be more streamlined. But what you'll notice, you mentioned the colors. The green is the actual complete application portion, right? That's when we're actually in the processing of the application formally, and that is shrunk down significantly. Now, where we're finding we're spending more time is we're trying to have that back and forth with the developers ahead of time to deal with issues before we get to that green point. So it depends on receptiveness, it depends on the ability to collaborate, but sometimes, yeah, that first part, that red or whatever color it is at the start, blue, will take longer. Again, it depends on a variety of factors. But the overall idea is that the process should be more streamlined and expedited.
If I may follow up, Chair. So then, if the new process, the pre-application piece, are there any constraints on us around that? Can we, like you've got the reiteration of the application revision piece going on, are we more constrained with that than we were previously, or does that give us the room that we need to make sure that we've got good, solid applications?
Another great question. Through you, Mr. Chair. I think in some ways, just because we are limited just by the Planning Act, by, the planning responsibilities that we have, we can't just call an application incomplete because we're not totally happy with maybe a design detail or something like that. I think we have to be careful in expectations because there's certain aspects that we might not be able to hold up issuing a complete application until they're addressed. I don't know if that's a constraint. It's always been that way. Actually, I would argue the contrary. At least now we have a better framework of terms of reference that stipulate what we need in those deliverables, and it's better defined than it was ever before. So I would say we've mitigated that constraint even by doing that. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Councillor Murray. Councillor Renchema.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bruder. Further to what your answer to Councillor Murray's question just now, I can see, working in the planning field for a few years, I've seen applications go back and forth, and a lot of misunderstanding in the rush to get them submitted. So as much that can happen ahead of time before submission, I would think would be better in the long run. While it may seem like a headache, at least there's a lot of communication going on ahead of time, and when it comes in, okay, we've had those discussions back and forth, and easier said than done, though, because you're doing all this in a shorter time frame. So, and interesting about the community information meetings. I think I remember another municipality requiring that at one point along the way through my work, that the developer do that. So a question. 2 questions. Prudhomes, what is the next step and the timeline for that with Prudhomes? What are we hearing?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So you're just asking Councillor about kind of where it's at the moment, generally speaking. So, well, there is already some pre-servicing approval. There's works happening now as we speak in Victoria Shores from a sanitary sewer perspective to make sure the lines feeding to the pumping station are upgraded as needed. The applicant's working through the additional phases of the commercial block right now from a site plan perspective to get going on some of the other elements within there. We expect that to be done shortly. That site plan is very far along. Then the other portion of this too, and it's something that was mentioned during previous components of this whole process, was that the draft plan of subdivision needs to be amended. Just in terms of the blocks, there's been a shifting of certain blocks and some changing of the shapes and things like that of where some of the commercial versus the high density versus the medium density, they've just shifted from the original concept, so we have to amend that draft plan as well. There's quite a bit of engineering work that goes into that, so that's been happening as well concurrently with these other things that I'm mentioning. So there should be an update coming forward to council soon too with that draft plan amendment as well.
Okay, I guess I'm asking if there's, we talked earlier on, you mentioned earlier on hesitancy, construction prices, bigger, expensive. Is there any hesitancy to carry through that you're hearing?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't say hesitancy, and I think the fact that some of the servicing work that's been started outside of the lands to facilitate the entire subdivision, the fact that it's been initiated and is occurring, I would say that's a good sign. There is a commitment that comes along with that, I think, so I would see that as a positive.
Great. And another question through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm impressed that you're taking on the official plan update. Would you do it again, having gone through what you're going through now, or would you hire a consultant?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a difficult question because ultimately speaking, I think and I hope the realization is that the department carries a consistently high workload. So from a workload management perspective, it is nice to be able to outsource. That said, with such an important and higher, overarching document like the official plan, being so town specific, I think there is a benefit to keeping it in-house. Again, we haven't gotten into too much of the finer grain. We're at the part now where we're assembling all the sections into one, the construction of the complete document, with all the amendments identified. So I'll revisit that question a little bit later in the process, but right now I think there is a benefit to keeping it in-house.
I could see that, and I appreciate that you're taking on that work and trying to get it done to your standards, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Menchima. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you very much, Chair Patrieva, through you to Matt. Thank you for this report. Definitely not an easy job that you have, especially with all the changes that come with any morning that you wake up. Looking at the numbers, you mentioned, when you came in at 2016 and the construction value was 40 million, and then in 2021 it was 180 million. How do you judge a busy day for your department? How do you quantify a busy day? Is it the legislation you have to read through? Is it the permit, the applications? I'm trying to understand how your staff was able to do $180 million worth of work in 2021.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a lot that goes into quantifying what the work would be. I think, that construction value you're seeing at the end of the process, right? You're seeing that's the permit release, that's the construction value for that particular development project. But, all the work that goes into that beforehand, you've got the planning side of things where we handle it from, like I said, we have a lot of early even before pre-consultation, we have a lot of those meetings. We discuss concepts, get into a room, a virtual room, an in-person room, have discussions about what should and shouldn't happen. We look at it, from as much of a technical perspective as we can at that point, but really it's higher level. Then we drill down more. We get into site plan reviews. Those reviews take a significant amount of time. They're very, very detailed. At any given time, pretty much all the staff have multiple site plan files that they're processing. So those reviews take a lot of time. So really a busy day for us. I would say, we've got all of the typical inquiries that happen that we don't know are coming throughout the day. Then we've got all of those detailed reviews. We've got a lot of correspondence with property owners on things that aren't even planning related as well that pop up. Just concerns, things that are coming up on their properties. And then, obviously trying to move those development applications through to the next phase. So all those things considered, I would probably tell you, and I think staff would agree, that just about every day is a pretty busy day.
Well, there's no doubt about that. I don't disagree with you there. So that being said, Committee of Adjustment, we've done a zoning bylaw review. What's that committee looking like? Is it busier now? Is it slower now? Has our zoning bylaw review basically solved a lot of these minor variance type issues? Has it been successful?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think to a degree, yes. Committee of Adjustment has been slower this year than in other years. I think part of it is that. I think part of it is, again, people with lending rates the way they are maybe rethinking some of their projects. So probably a combination of both. You're never going to completely address all the Committee of Adjustment applications that might come forward with policy updates, because there's always that site-specific circumstance that you couldn't factor in with kind of a more overarching policy framework or zoning bylaw. But generally speaking, it has been a little slower this past year than previous years, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michalak. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 questions as well. Matt, in my first question, I want to have you consider the province introducing incentives to counter higher interest rates and whether or not we're at a point now where they're going to be finalizing those decisions.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I haven't heard of any finalization of those decisions yet. I just, high level, have probably heard the same that you've heard, Your Worship, but I don't have any additional news.
All right, and Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of other things under the, under that heading of what's being approved that I think are quite important. And one is the position that they're taking on the quality of finished materials. And the other one is the compatibility, their position on compatibility within neighborhoods. Not good news if you look at both of those from the perspective of community input. Anything more on either of those?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing more on either of those other than now that's part of what we're doing with our official plan. We have a section in there for site plan control. That needs to be revised based on some of that direction now that's been given by the province. Certain things that we would have had a lot of control over, we don't have the same amount of control over now, those items that you just mentioned, but nothing further other than that I've heard.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, we have a challenge ahead of us with this whole business of interest rates and the inability of developers to move as quickly as they probably would normally. And so this is my perspective, that sometimes things take much longer than they ought to. And with the complicating legislature around heritage in particular, but it could be any number of things. I'm curious to know whether or not the council should be thinking about, and I would never have thought that this was, I knew other municipalities were doing it, but I didn't think it was necessary here because of the quality of our staff. But third-party protection is really an issue that when we get into disagreements with people, if that happens, and we're getting near the point where we're going to have money taken away from us because this is not moving forward, because we're not getting the cooperation that we need. Are there mechanisms where we could request a third-party review? And I know that this was common, and it certainly costs money, but as opposed to losing money, is that something that we should be considering in our budget?
Through you, Mr. Chair, third-party reviews are definitely something at certain points we need to consider. Now, I say that with a caveat. I think, in the interest of trying to streamline processes, generally speaking, you want to make sure you use those when you need them most. We've done so already in the past. We've done them with certain things from a technical standpoint, from an infrastructure perspective, modeling, and a lot of the costs associated with those things aren't even what we build in. We're able to bill a lot of that back to a prospective developer as part of the process. We have that option to do that. So that's part and parcel with doing business, generally speaking, when we have a complex issue like that. We also have other resources that we can leverage, even from an urban design standpoint. You mentioned there's less consideration in urban design. That doesn't mean we still don't focus on those things as much as we possibly can. We have, again, the urban design team at the region, led by Caldoun, fabulous, a lot of support. So these things, these third-party reviews, third-party undertakings are things that we have been doing already, and we'll continue to do them as needed.
Okay, well, that's very helpful, Mr. Chairman. And the last question that I have is, in regard to the official plan, because the region went through such a comprehensive review, how much of what is in that document, in terms of some of the technical support, do you think that we would be able to, what would be relevant in terms of the work that we're going to be doing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think really the bulk of it is relevant. We do still have to conform to it. We have to go through a conformity exercise in accordance with the new regional official plan. We're doing that now. There's a lot of policies in there. There's a lot of updated verbiage when it comes to, again, infrastructure, things like climate change, things like growth and intensification. All those things do have a reflection on how we update our official plan. So that's an exercise we're going through now, but there is a lot of relevancy across a lot of the plan, generally speaking. Now, again, the regional official plan is even more broad. It's very overarching. So our job as staff looking at that is to pare it down to what the implications are for Lincoln specific. And those topics that I just mentioned all have implications. So we're going through that now.
That's great. So that's another reason not to have to use any external expert. But I know, having gone through the regional official plan, there were experts that came forward that certainly were unique in the way they approach things. And so the help is there if we need it. That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Bruder. I'm looking at the appendix that came with the report for this section, and I'm coupling it with the next presentation. And I'm trying to make sense of it, and sometimes that's not always easy for myself. But is there a reason why there's so much historical data on here? And I'm looking at, like, there's things that were assumed back in 2017 that are still on this list. Is there a reason why?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just other than, when you look at some of these trends, when you look at some of this information, I just felt it appropriate to look back a little bit further than maybe the last couple of years. But I don't know, maybe Ms. Shee is here too. She might be able to provide some insight because I know she was working with a lot of that data as well. And we did have this conversation. But again, just relevancy from a general kind of longer term trends perspective to give you a little bit of an update. But I don't know if Ms. Shee's got any additional insight.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Also, developments where there are some units outstanding, so they may have been phased over the last 10 years. We kept in the total number of units just so you can see how much has been built out and how much is left. So that's why you'll see some from 2017.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, one follow-up. Is it possible to add another column onto here as to when this first hit the list? Just to give some context, like, again, there's developments that are being approved this year, and I can't find them on here because I don't know maybe the name of the developer, but at least then it'll give some context of time of how long it's been on there, how long it's been sitting in site process approval, how long it's been sitting there with an approval already done, and the developer's just sitting there. Is that possible?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think so. And I think we could even, if there was a report where there was a recommendation for approval, we can even identify when that was brought forward in the report number too, just for cross-reference if that helps as well. So yes, we could do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair Patsariva. Through you to Director Bruder. I had a question with regards to the official plan review and the reasons why you were choosing to do it in-house. I think those have been answered through the question through Councillor Rinchema, but also through the mayor's further dialogue. But I'm just wondering, you've referenced a couple times Lincoln specific. We talk about, we use the buzzword all the time, made in Lincoln solutions. So with regards to the official plan, I'm wondering if you could just give us a couple of, areas in the official plan that your staff is working that are specific to Lincoln that our residents can kind of identify with.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a few, some of them challenges, some of them opportunities specific to Lincoln. First, with the agriculturally related non-farm diversified uses, we want to make sure that that's front and center in our agricultural policies. I think that's a big driver here in Lincoln that we want to see recognized in local policy. It always was, but we want to make sure that we're up to date and have all the required policy clarification needed to move forward expeditiously. I think of other things too, from an employment perspective, just looking at non-residential growth, that's something that we're also looking to be a little more Lincoln specific on, just because our situation is different from other municipalities in terms of what might be available here. So those are a few things, even from the, perspective of growth and where it's anticipated in terms of its more dense forms, making sure all of our mapping is up to date and making sure that those areas are prioritized when it comes to, significant high-density intensification. So those things that are a little bit more specific, those are just a few examples, but hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the more Lincoln-specific considerations.
Okay, great. Thank you, Director. Follow-up, or a second question through you, Chair. So Matt, on slide 7, under the Planning Department initiatives, we talk about updates to council, and we talk about, you mentioned in your slide, provide comments to the province. So we've been hearing, since we first heard about all these bills, Bill 23, Bill 109, we keep hearing about, the province is going to make us whole. So I'm just wondering if you could kind of elaborate as to when you say we're providing comments to the province, how are we doing that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, typically what we try to do is, there's always a comment period associated with these particular updates to provincial policy. We try to time it where we bring a report forward to you, to committee and council ahead of time when that report gets received as part of that's our comment submission, essentially, what we're providing to the province. So the contents of that report, how we identify the impacts and what it means to Lincoln, what we'd like to see in some of the, if there were potential revisions and that kind of commentary, that's what we provide to the province. So those things get carried forward. And we make our best efforts, obviously, to make sure that they come to council first before we do that. There's going to be one coming at the end of November, just on some of the latest changes with some of the walking back of greenbelt protections and things like that, and some of the commentary. And I know Councillor Brunet, you had a question or two about that offline too, and how we're going to comment. Those are other things that we're going to be putting together as well, so it's continuing. But that's typically how we do it.
Okay, thank you. And just through you, Chair, one of the slides talks about community benefit changes and parkland dedication bylaw changes. So again, with the same mindset that, we keep hearing we're going to be made whole, communities are going to be made whole. I'm just wondering, at the end of the day, when the dust settles, if you could just comment, I think I know the answer, but if you could just comment, are we going to be better off or worse off in terms of what we're going to come away with because of these changes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think any municipality could say that they're going to end up getting more parkland dedication or more of anything else that we're entitled to collect as a result of the changes from Bill 23 and some of the other legislation. So definitely not, in most of the cases, not as well off as we would have been without those changes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunet. Councillor Renchema.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Bruder. I'm wondering about the BDSS property, which is going to be declared surplus, presumably, or soon, or has it, or are we treating that, are we looking at that within our official plan and how we would like that whole property to be developed in the long run?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think necessarily that we would include that in our official plan update, but the way it would go down is, I think, and perhaps our CAO would like to provide additional comment, but it would be part of, probably not to the extent of a full-on secondary plan, but some type of master planning exercise that would then contemplate, A, what we've already got in our official plan in terms of policy framework, because we'd want to make sure we're adhering to that to the greatest extent possible, but B, if there needs to be inclusions for some of the things that are planned on that site through the overall strategic planning process, that they get incorporated. Just it would either be an amendment or it would be some other process to kind of incorporate them into the official plan. But I would say, there's kind of a dual purpose where we use the official plan as it is revised to inform what happens there, but then subsequently, similar to what we do with secondary plans, like for the Prudhoe secondary plan, eventually it does get incorporated into the official plan when it's done, so.
So I guess the question is, are we satisfied with what our official plan predicts or directs for that site as it sits right now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think some of that is still open for some more working and shaping along with that strategic process that's going to come out of this. So I think there's an ability to still manipulate and mold what we want in that area moving forward. So I don't think necessarily we need to be confined with what the official plan is today in terms of us being satisfied. I think we can go through a process and improve as needed as we go through that.
No urgency to make any changes at the moment. We'll kind of wait and see a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Reimer. Thank you, Councilor Renchma.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. A couple of comments quickly through you to Director Bruder. I just want to commend you, Matt, and you and your planning department for taking on the official plan revision. Doing it in-house, I think sometimes outside input loses a little bit of that Lincoln flavor that you alluded to, and I'm confident that we're going to find the needed outcome from you and our staff. So thank you for that. It was a great report, except I think you failed in one area. And I'll say that in looking at some of those stats, in 2018, 2019, it was alluded here or asked about what a full day constitutes. And being in the private sector, I know how many times stuff gets thrown at you that has no intentions of going through or very little intentions going through. So when I see 2018, 2019 numbers, I can only imagine the amount of time that staff took on stuff that did not make it through. And I can only imagine that was astronomical. So, you know, when you talk about actually doing 2 days' work in 1 day, those years would probably, I know your building department, I've alluded to that before in council here about the building department and the amount of work, sheer amount of work that they put through the department. So maybe just to comment on that, I think you've underestimated how much time your planning department spends on you know, tire kickers and people just throwing stuff out there. I think it would be enormous. So thank you, and to you, Director, for some comments. Some comments on that, Director Bruder?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of conversations that happen. They're not necessarily tied with developments that council or the community sees come through, or even planning document updates. You're right, there's tire kickers, there's people asking about a wide variety of things on their property, and often the first stage is to approach the planning department just in terms of what can be done, what can't be done. A lot of things do never, you're right, they don't necessarily see the light of day, but staff do endeavor to make sure that we provide, you know, I've seen many times from our staff detailed policy breakdowns, trying to explain. It's another thing that's difficult and takes time is, you know, we read this stuff all the time, this policy language, and for us, oh yeah, you can X, Y, and Z, it makes perfect sense, but to somebody else that for the first time is looking at doing something on their property, it makes no sense. So you have to kind of try to reword it and explain, and sometimes that not only takes time, but some back and forth, and oftentimes invitations for more in-person meetings than probably a lot would expect, just because that interaction is valuable to try to get the point across and get the general intent of the framework that's being applied. So definitely appreciate your comments, and I think you're spot on.
Thank you, Director Bruder. Thank you, Chair Patriva.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Reimer. And you know what, Matt, it's an excellent report, and I think the changes are going to make our lives as council easier with that developer-led session, right? We can flush out some of the answers, and you know, Councilor Reimer alluded to it. There's probably even going to be more hand-holding needing going forward, but your office is well-equipped to do that. We appreciate everything you do. So, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councilor Timmers to receive and file report PD 38-23 regarding the Planning Department update report for 2023. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'll close the vote, and that carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Van. So we will now consider report PD 40-23, the Building Activity Report. Do members of committee have any questions? Okay. There being no further discussion, I have a motion read by Councilor Brunet to receive and file report PD 40-23 regarding building activity report from July to September 2023. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I will close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. Confidential items, we have none. Any committee remarks? Councillor Bernay.
Thank you, Chair. So not really a remark, but a question through you to the CAO. So I'm just wondering, we've all heard recently in the media, it's been well documented that, the province has done a reversal on their thoughts on the Greenbelt. So I'm wondering through you, Chair, to the CAO, have we started to hear anything from the development community with regards to that? And, we have a secondary plan that speaks to height in our community. And I'm just wondering how you see this being an obstacle as we move forward. So I don't want to get ahead of the first question, but I think you know where I'm going with this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. I think it's an interesting question in that last week, Director Bruder and I met with a few of our local developers that are doing work in our community, more by happenstance than anything else. And I would suggest to you that almost in unison, albeit they were very different meetings, all three of the developers we spoke with suggested that as a result of the reversal of some of the urban boundary expansions, that we would likely see requests for more height. It is something that I think we're hearing. To your point, Councillor, do I suspect that it's something that'll be a little bit more of a concerted effort? Yes. What it means from a secondary planning perspective and a policy perspective, I think our planning policies still are ones that define height and allow us to be restrictive. But should something like this be challenged at the OLT, I guess it would be interesting to determine as a result of this reversal where the OLT finds itself. But I don't know if Director Graham or Ms. Shee, or sorry, Director Bruder or Ms. Shee have any additional comments. But definitely something we're hearing about. As I said, Matt and I both said to ourselves, okay, this is probably a lot of what we're going to start hearing more and more.
Sorry, if I could, just a couple of comments. I think, Mike's right. We heard that from a few developers. I think we're going to continue to hear that. And speaking with some of my colleagues, they're hearing similar things. But even when I look at things like height, things like density, I think the metric is changing a little bit with how the province looks at some of these things. Traditionally, yes, you'd have a height and density framework, and those were the provisions you had. And I think they're still important to have in our documents, but more recently, a lot of what is permitted is tied into what the site and the associated infrastructure can handle. What are the capacities? What are the technical parameters? And I think sometimes a little bit of that urban design consideration can get lost in that. I think that's one of the potential flaws, but I think that's how things are looked at a little more recently, again, at a higher level. Not to say that the policies we do have with those things aren't important, but again, I think there's been a little bit of shift on how those things are evaluated. I've even noticed in a lot of other municipalities, things like height limitations are lifted on certain areas. I think a lot of that is strategic, but again, the focus shifting more to infrastructure capacities and things of the like. So just a couple of comments and observations. Thank you.
Councillor Bernay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask the question, and I appreciate the responses of both staff. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor. You know what? And you tweaked a question that I had because of that. So with the returning of the lands that were taken out of the Greenbelt, there was also an opportunity, I was reading, for examinations of lands. We've had the issue with Prudhome's. We've had the issue of the Beamsville Bight in the GO area. Will we be providing any input on those changes? Because again, it was, you go back to the initiation of the whole Greenbelt in 2003, and there was never any boots on the ground. So now that we've had that information, will we be providing that to the province to say, okay, maybe these are reasonable areas?
Yeah, through you to you, Mr. Chair. That's something that we are looking at. We do have kind of that list of what we've been considering in the past, and I think that's something, we can continue to provide and communicate on, with the comment deadline being currently open now. So that's going to be part of a future report coming to council as well.
To you, Chair, as well. I mean, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say I think the likelihood of something like that happening is very slim to none. If I'm a betting person, I'm going to the none. However, I think, when you think of the Beacon, which is, one very specifically that has been a hotel, that has been a concrete site for as many years, I think, as many of us can remember, we may have to look at some other planning approaches to address some of these things if we want redevelopment on that particular site. So I think, we're going to have to see what levels of creativity we can find when putting proposals forward, because I would tell you, I don't think the Greenbelt's going to be touched for a very long time.
No, I appreciate that answer, Mr. CEO, but a fellow once said you miss 100% of the shots you never take. So let's take the shot and see where it falls. So there being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 8:30.